Well, joining us now is Nick Kaufman, a former prosecutor from the International Criminal Court. You know, following Abu Aqleh's death, the Palestinians immediately blamed Israel, and that became the narrative that we were really seeing across the world. So why are the Palestinians refusing a joint investigation with Israel if they're so sure of themselves? And how can a solely Palestinian investigation truly be viewed as credible?
Well, good morning, Natasha. Well, I'm not going to get into whether or not a Palestinian investigation can be credible. But one thing that I did note yesterday or the day before was that Abu Mazen immediately called for the International Criminal Court to investigate this matter. But the irony is that the International Criminal Court operates on the principle of what is called complementarity, which means that it will not deem a specific case admissible if a national authority is investigating the matter in an honest and open fashion. And that can be Israel for all intents and purposes. Now, the Palestinians will not be the judges of the integrity of a domestic national investigation, but the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. And the refusal of the Palestinian Authority to ensure that vital ballistic evidence is turned over, even temporarily for forensic analysis, will backfire on them. To put it in other words, the Palestinian Authority cannot rely on its own willful lack of cooperation in order to seek an International Criminal Court investigation.
Right. So let's say, though, you know, that this matter was brought to the International Criminal Court, despite everything that you just outlined here. What would that actually mean for Israel? We know that Israel does not view the ICC as you could say, credible or fair in its judgment of Israel.
Doesn't make any difference, Natasha. As long as Israel is investigating the matter, then and investigating it in a genuine and honest fashion, then the International Criminal Court doesn't have jurisdiction over the matter. It's not deemed admissible. And quite frankly, I don't think that the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court will go into such micro-resolution in determining whether or not to take up this case. The IDF has a recognized system of military inquiry which is always put into place after any military incident, whether it be prima facie criminal, disciplinary, or even negligent. In the present instance, mistakes obviously were made by certain media-conscious politicians which preempted such an inquiry. But the offer to conduct a joint independent inquiry is something which is not unusual, but is warranted in the high-profile nature of the present circumstances.
Now, Abu Aqleh is a Palestinian American. That means that she has U.S. citizenship. So how can we expect the United States to get involved here? Because we do know that Israel is encouraging U.S. involvement.
Well, I think that the United States has already made some form of official request or official expectation. I think the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has already mentioned that it would be advisable for an international inquiry to take place, or a joint international inquiry. I'm not so sure whether that's actually a good idea in the long run, because at the end of the day, you can't judge which cases are meritorious of such a joint investigation, which aren't. And it could be the case that every time there's an incident of this nature, then there's a call for an international joint inquiry.
Well, you know, at this point, with the way that the international media has been covering the story, the way we've been seeing it covered on social media, Israel is really being portrayed as solely responsible for the death of Abu Aqleh, even though no formal investigation has actually been done yet. So it feels like the public has really already made their judgment. My question then is, you know, would a true investigation really have the impact to change that mentality at this point?
I think it's all a matter of optics and how well Israel portrays the means of its conduct of an inquiry and shares the information with the general public. Yes, there should be an inquiry into this. There have been at least 3 eyewitnesses who've testified to the fact that they saw how the crossfire took place. These people should be interviewed, and they should be allowed to tell their testimony and give their testimony to some form of inquiry.
All right. Well, you know, obviously, I think everybody is waiting on the edge of their seats to see what is going to happen with an investigation, when this is going to take place, if we're going to see that joint investigation take place ultimately between the Palestinians and Israelis. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us and breaking everything down in terms of the ICC's involvement as well.